Is it recording?
Yes. I think that one and the one before it. I don't think.
Oh no! See, now you guys feel our frustration.
Technology.
See, it's the parents. These are the expectations for the parents, your checklist.
But that's how it goes. So like every day
you just gotta roll with it.
Yes, you have this wonderful lesson planned, and like our district is solely non-paper. So it's all technology based, and you like think you spend like half of your evening creating this awesome lesson. Something happens, technology
in
don't
a
work.
perfect world, but then reality hits you, and it's like,
okay,
that's not how I planned it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So explain to the listeners what we're talking about.
Technical difficulties. It was
It's
on
not
my
a difficulty. It was not doing my job.
It was a user error.
So basically, this whole time we recorded 2 sessions so far. I turned on our timer so we could stay on track, but I forgot to hit the actual record, the voice recorder.
Welcome to the Indigenous21 Podcast, where we discuss modern Native narratives in the 21st century. This is DeeDee speaking to you guys post-production and editing, just giving you a heads up that there was no recording on our end of the first hour that we actually had this sit down and discussion with our 2 lovely guests. For quality purposes, I, at my own discretion, just made some decisions in what I thought would be best in order to make the content still make sense after I was finished editing everything. So some things did not make it into this final cut. And again, that was on us, our apologies. And hopefully you love the intro to this podcast. Hopefully you still get involved with the discussions pertaining to this subject matter. We love hearing from you guys in the comments. We love hearing recordings from you guys that you send us through Anchor. So go ahead and enjoy this podcast, and hopefully you can join us for a future episode.
Thank you all for being here. Na povi ayungang oka na simanayan matiwa nabi popi ikawe Christy pavayagang naka na alit o olot o katsinit o hangomo na tewa toamo. My name is Christy Pavaya. I come from the village of Tewa, and I come from the Parrot, Kachina, and Crow clans.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mindy Sikekuku. I come from the village of Tewa, and I am San Clan.
I want to know how you guys have been handling the whole virtual learning when it was apparent from your school districts that everything was going to go virtual learning.
For myself, I think it was... we knew it was coming, eventually, especially with COVID hitting, in different ways and seeing the numbers rise. But I think the most important thing is for all the teachers is we knew that we have a job to do regardless. We have a job to do regardless. And our job is ultimately to teach our students, whether that's in person or, virtual learning like how we're doing now. So I think as soon as we got the announcement that that was going to happen, I think everybody just automatically put their game faces on and we started developing a plan of what we can do. But now being, so many months into it, we've changed. We've changed a lot of things. Every day things are constantly changing. But then I think it's just ultimately keeping that goal in mind that, we're here for our kids and that's that's our job. That's what we're here to do every day. So just really trying to be open to all the different circumstances, for our kids.
And I think for me personally, hearing the news, I felt more of a relief at the beginning. Being a parent and being an educator, I felt the relief that we were going to have this opportunity to teach from home. As we progressed, we really didn't have we had some sort of direction as to what platforms we were going to use. We didn't have hearsay as when they were going to be available. So a lot of us educators jumped together, started creating resources automatically during the summer, getting things ready just in case such and such wasn't up running at the beginning of the school year. We had ways to already start the process of online learning. And as we progress, that relief now is kind of filtering into frustration. Self-care is super crucial at this moment. And just learning how to balance your social, emotional person along with this professional person that you are. And, the frustrations now I think are starting to come forth.
me as a parent, that was my biggest fear, was when there was a lot of push, from other people that weren't taking the public as a whole, their health, going back to school no matter what. I think everybody went through that whole, we're shut down that first year, right? Towards the end of the last school year.
Yeah, so just to let our listeners and viewers know that we are Arizona-based. The numbers being what they were in the summer, us being the second hotspot after New York,
Right.
it did really heavily affect the way we ended the school year, last school year as well. I also am employed at a middle school. So I think the other thing too I'd like to mention is just I see our teachers on our campus having to do all these extra duties and working extra hours. Our mother is a teacher, so we are just embedded into this whole education community. So we know everybody's stories, everybody's struggles. But also me coming from my position that I work, I'm having to help facilitate other tasks that I would normally not do. So how has that impacted your mental health?
I think it's really important that you have those colleagues that you can reach out to, because it is very stressful. Every day, something's always changing. Yeah. We we have our mindset of what we're going to do. We have an idea of what we're going to do. And then, sometimes you have administration that will come in and completely change it. Say, no, you have to implement this, or no, you have to do this. So then it's going back to the drawing wheel and, just starting all over again. So mentally, I can say it's really, really tough. Just the idea of having to constantly change things,
be innovative,
and just to be creative. I mean, granted, some of the schools do have the curriculum that they can use. They have formats they can follow, but then, you have other schools who don't have the opportunity. So I can say for myself, my material is created from scratch. So you can see me sitting here creating things, trying to make it interactive, trying to make it fun, something that the kids will actually enjoy, rather than just, okay, here's your assignment, go ahead and turn it in.
And what's the age range that you're teaching?
Currently, I'm teaching at an elementary school. Fourth quarter, when it was decided that the schools were going to be closed, we had the opportunity for some of the kids to go virtual or to go on a paper packet. So the kids who were, virtual, they kind of already had that experience. So starting this school year, it wasn't as bad. But you have a lot of kids who didn't have the opportunity to be virtual. So you have a lot of parents who are trying to set up the internet. Once they got the internet set up, well, how do I log in? How do I do this? That's my username. Yeah. So the first 2 weeks was just more or less how to log in. Where do I find my assignment? Just those very simple things. So I think as a school, or, just in general, that it was a big realization for us that, students and parents weren't ready for the virtual, change either. Because we think that we grew up in a virtual world, or we're living in a virtual world. But when it comes to something like this, we're not, we're not prepared for it.
It hasn't been practiced. So we don't have that muscle memory of what to do.
So really from the beginning of the school year, it was just very basic of how to log in. So it just kind of feels like at the beginning of the year, we weren't so much focused on academics. We just needed to make sure everybody was logged in, everybody was ready, everybody was set up. I mean, even something as small as, okay, boys and girls, are you in your quiet place? Do you have a place where you can work? Because, you have other students in the background, you have parents in the background. And
that was something that was always pretty interesting to me when I first saw the requirements, I guess, that they started sending out as far as, the students' workspace. The expectations that they sent out. And I was speaking to him and the rest of, our mom, she's a educator as well. And then I was thinking in terms of our Indigenous people, because our communities, we have multi-generational households.
With like 2 bedrooms.
Right. And not every child is afforded their own room to be able to seclude themselves and give themselves that dedicated workspace. It has to be a nice background, or it has to be quiet. And it's like, obviously these people they're not taking into consideration the cultural aspects of what the home life
living
is.
conditions.
Yes, it sounds good on paper, and that may work for a specific demographic, that they're thinking of and that they may be used to, but for our demographic, it's completely different. The foresight of all of that, it was totally missed.
And we know that that's pretty kind of the norm, I guess you could say, is that we have a lot of children that are being raised by their grandparents also. Right. So you have to take that into consideration. Okay, well, how can we help them? We know they're not familiar with the virtual aspect. So what more can we do for them? How can we support them? And, and just let them know that we're there, that we're there to help them with whatever they need. So I know for myself, I'm constantly getting phone calls. I'm constantly getting text messages. But, at the end of the day, you just have to, try and help them as best as you can, with what you have at the time.
Your specific demographic is reservation school, and you're having to overcome those barriers of the cultural aspects of the home life. Like you said, grandparents raising the grandchildren. Maybe there's more than one child. Definitely more than one child in the house, and there's not that much space. What about you, Christy? What was your demographic?
Well, I work in a metropolitan area, and I work for a school that's primarily the population is highly Hispanic. And going in, you kind of see a lot of the household demographics similar to us on the reservation. Okay. The only barrier there is that as an ELD teacher, it's the barrier of language. Having parents at home who speak only Spanish, their student speaks English and Spanish, and finding a way to reach those parents to feel comfortable enough to outreach to you. And it's creating a community, not only a classroom community, not only with your students, but a huge classroom community with your parents, because they're the general support for you at this moment. And for me, it's taken a lot of initiative to learn the language myself, learning how to speak, even if it's a minimal conversation. And I think that going forward, just understanding that for a lot of parents and grandparents, that schools are seen more as an assimilatory space. For some reason or another, there's that fear there of education, and it's creating a place where they feel comfortable enough to approach you. Okay. And I think that is crucial at this moment, and understanding and approaching these children the same way that I would if I was teaching out home, is teaching these children to be proud of who they are, be proud of where they come from, be proud of their language, their heritage language, and the ability that they have to speak, because that is a definition of who you are. In the metropolitan area, yes, we do have access to Wi-Fi. Our district has provided hotspots if students should need them. Parents, some, you have that inequality there as well, though, based on economical status of those parents that are able to afford the faster internet packages, devices, and the parents who are able to afford the internet, but it might not be the highest speed package, and they have multiple students on that internet stream throughout the day. And it's just being mindful of those conditions and not holding too much expectations at this moment on each individual student, and understanding and not creating biases yourself as an educator.
Right.
What age range do you work with?
I work with an elementary setting.
Okay, so you both work in, with the younger population, where I see the main struggle being as like having them sit still in Zoom or whatever, video chat that you're going to have to teach them with for a good half an hour. And whereas my demographic is working from a middle school perspective, you brought up the language barrier, because I as well, over 80% of the school population that I work at is Hispanic. A good percentage is also Native. So when you have, and there's other cultures out there, we have people from the Asian community as well. And, they're the firstborn within their family to be citizens. So that language barrier is there. And when it comes to the middle school perspective, it's like, how do you trust that student is conveying the appropriate information to get the work done to the parents? And like, oh no, it's okay. They didn't say we have to do this. It's only X, Y, but we don't have to do Z. That's what they said. I swear, I promise. That's one thing that I've seen is, and seeing from my kids, and speaking.
We got smart little ones too.
As well. I do not teach specifically in a classroom, but I do work very closely with our administration. And so I do, kind of get the behind the scenes a little bit scope of certain things, where one question that I had for our administration was, well, okay, we're teaching these kids and they're staying at home. How are we doing our audits for attendance in order to receive funding for every single child that is present, isn't present, or what if they're here for one Zoom class and they don't show up to another Zoom class, you know?
So it's like they're being really selective on which courses or which classes that they're attending. And they're being very, like you said, very creative about it, because even me too, because my demographic as a parent is I have a high school student, and I'm pretty much letting him drive the whole thing, and I'm being very trusting that he's giving me accurate information. And one, because he's definitely earned my, he's been very trustworthy with me. So anything that I do find out to be contradictory, we do have issues, there's consequences for that. So he does know, that he needs to be honest with me, because I have my ways of finding out. I work from home. I've already been working from home since the beginning of the year. So I was already set up with the whole internet package and everything like that. And unfortunately, I am very, very fortunate and blessed to be able to provide my son with his own device, nothing that was issued from the school. And I was able to create, we do share a room together. So he does have his private side of the space, and I have mine, and that we just use with a tent that he has. And but I managed to, over the summer, create a workspace that was going to suit both me and him. And we're working very parallel to one another, because we have a 1-bedroom plus a loft. So it's not very much. And then we live with him and his husband. 4 of us in that space, so there's 4 of us. So we're all sharing this space together. So we just kind of I had to lay it out for my employer, like, these are the living circumstances. He doesn't have his own room. There is no way that I'm putting my workstation or his workstation in the living room, where that living room is the only communal space for us to kind of separate from one another for a moment. My particular job, I also help document our disciplinary actions. Students checking out computer devices, what are they going to do with those computers, And normally in the past, in previous school years, if this kid is caught bypassing our security system and accessing stuff they shouldn't be accessing, and, the usual consequence would be, all right, we're revoking your access to these devices. You're only going to be using the computer when you're with your class inside the computer lab. It's like, but now we can't do that. We're not allowed to say, no, you cannot use a Chrome, because that's a way of accessing, So right now what we're struggling with is how do you reprimand something for happening with this device, but yet you cannot take this device away. And on top of that, we can't go and see that kid in person. It's always leave a message with home. And half the times it is like leaving a voicemail, sending an email. You don't talk to anybody in person as far as an adult goes in explaining the situation. So you just kind of have to trust, hopefully they know. So speaking of behaviors, what is it like, let's say, for instance, if you have other kids, you described having your own job and having a kid home with you. What if you're a teacher and having a kid at home? How do you handle that?
That is me. So currently I have my daughter, and I also have my boyfriend's son living with us. So we have 2 kiddos in elementary school, plus me doing my job. And, some days you wonder at the end of the day, how did I make that work? How did my kids still get learning done? How was I still able to teach, and the balance of that? And I think that one thing that it really brings to light is just the appreciation now that families have to your own personal family, to see what you do every day. That's really important. Yes, they know mom's a teacher. Yes, they know I work at a school, but now they actually get to see what it is I do every day, what I deal with every day.
Yeah.
For me, it's the login issue. So with the district, you have changing passwords, you have the Zoom info, you have all of that. And what happens when you're in the middle of the lesson and your kiddo is having trouble logging in? What do you do? So it's that split second decision, like, okay, all right, sorry, kiddos, Miss Bavaya needs to help her kiddos. She's having login issues, but it's also giving your students an opportunity also to see you as a person, to see you as a person that has a family, that's a mom, that has responsibilities just like their parents,
So do you and your child have the same, like me and my son, where the workspaces are pretty much in the same area?
Yes. And they're both at the same school.
So
And
that helps, right?
yes, it does. And so I kind of already have the experience with the login issues, how to navigate it, how to technology wise, how to deal with it, what they need to do. Luckily, they have me for that. But it's just like, I can see how frustrated I get as a teacher for the district, as a mom, as a parent, and then also thinking about my students and my parents and my grandparents. Imagine their frustration. Yeah. You have some students who have older siblings, and it's also teaching them also, you're not their teacher, but hey, be mindful. We can hear everything happening on your end, like having those kind of conversations.
Oh, that's a lot of fun.
How has that been?
My daughter, she had a funny story this week. The teacher created a lesson where they got to share pets. I heard her laughing so hard, and I was like, Siwa, I was like, shh, be quiet, mom's teaching. She couldn't stop laughing. I muted myself, and I was like, what's going on? And she said, somebody brought a chicken to the chat. And I was like, a chicken? And she's like, yeah, there's 3 of them. And then I guess the kid was holding the chicken to show to the Zoom, like to the camera. And then the chicken took off. And so he's in the back of his Zoom area chasing his chickens around in his house. And she was laughing so hard. And, you as a parent also get to see the creativity of your students' teachers. And then having those conversations with them as well, being able to bounce ideas off of each other. Hey, what's working for you? This is what's working for me. And kind of also having that extended support of your colleagues outside of your own networking professional areas.
Okay.
And even with me and Mindy, we debrief a lot. We debrief and we text, we talk, hey, I found this out, or hey, this grant's available, you should apply. And, we share a lot of information with each other.
So for myself, I can say I don't have any children of my own. I guess, quote unquote, I'm just the teacher during the day. But, it is interesting to see the dynamics, of the different homes and with the area that I work in. How early we talked about the multi-generation homes, and, you see that. So I just want to share a quick story. I remember one day, one of my boys was sitting outside, and I'm like, what are you doing outside? Are you okay? And I'm like, oh yeah, it's okay. I just want to be outside today. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, well, that's cool. So it was fine. And then the next day I had another boy sitting outside. I'm like, oh, are you okay? He's like, yeah, it's just too loud in my house. I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine. So they were finishing up the assessments for the day. And I was like, okay, well, you can go ahead and log off now. He was like, oh, okay. And he went up to the camera and he had little sweat beads on his nose. I'm like, oh, you can go inside now. He's like, okay, we'll see you tomorrow. Bye. So it's just funny, that the area that we live in, for them sitting outside, it's no big deal. Like, oh, we'll sit outside. We'll go to school. No big deal. Then you can hear the dogs barking and cars driving by, and, they're in their own atmosphere. So, at the end of the day, it's like, as long as you're comfortable and you're learning, okay, let's go for it. Right. So I notice my kids like to sit outside now, which is fine, as long as they're doing what they need to do. But it's just
the connection's still there.
Yeah, as long as they can see me and I can see them.
Appropriate.
Yeah. Yep. So it's funny because I think that's just the one thing is that we do have to constantly remind the parents, like, yes, we can hear you. Yes, we can see you. I can hear your music in the background. Yes. Can you go ahead and turn that down, because even simple things, they think because their headphones are plugged in, that's all they hear. But we hear the whole background. You can hear other kids, other family members. One of them was talking about a birthday party one time, so I think that's just what it is, trying to remember for everybody to be mindful, because it's not just I can hear it. Everybody in the chat can hear it,
Today my boy brought up, he was like, you were talking real loud. I'm like, reading class. He's like, yeah. I'm like, how come you didn't see anything?
I can say, within the teaching career, you have a vast majority of ages. You have a vast majority of experiences, so you have some of those teachers who are going to need more help, with this virtual aspect. So, and I think that's the most important part, like you mentioned, is being part of the team. Like, this is now more than ever. There's no I in team. We have to back each other up. We have to support one another. We have to be there through the good, the bad, and the ugly. And, right now, it's only September, and I can say for my school district, we're finishing up first quarter, but you have other schools, out home, they're on week 2, so it's just a lot of networking, and it's a different type of networking, because and like Christy said, we just finished, our debriefing from things that have been happening. And, to us, it's funny, but, I told her today, I'm like, I'm getting better. I'm not crying every other day like how I used to, I'm crying every other week now. So it's okay. But, just knowing that, it's okay. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be mad. But as long as you have somebody there, can, be your significant other, your other teaching colleagues, and even your parents, anybody. Right. So I think that's one thing I'm really realizing is now, because I come from, on my dad's side, I have that strong teacher background, but then on my mom's side, I tell them, well, this is happening. Parents aren't doing this, or this is happening. And I'm hoping it kind of opens up their perspectives, as being a parent, like, okay, well, I really need to help in this area. Or how can I, better my relationship with my children's teacher, or, appreciate it. And it's funny because I always remember, last year or this year when the pandemic first happened, you see memes on Facebook, support your teacher. I'm going to give them whatever they want. If they want 20 glue sticks, I'm going to give them 50 glue sticks. They deserve this, they deserve that. And so, everyone's like, hey, we're finally getting appreciated. Like, that's kind of nice. And then when school starts, everyone's like, they need to go back to school. You want this, you're asking this, you want my child to do, I'm supposed to do what? And you're like, can we go back to March and everybody appreciated us? Like, can I have some glue sticks back? So it's just, so funny how fast people's mindsets can change,
That's interesting too, huh? From the parents' side, where our lists that we would
the school supplies list.
And it's like, why do I have to? Why can't I just purchase for my own child and that's it?
And that's something that's different in the metropolitan area than it is at home. That parents are expected to contribute to the school community.
Right.
Versus coming from the reservation setting where,
everything's provided.
We do have tribal funds available. So growing up and going to school on the res, we never had lists.
I never
teachers.
remember that.
We never contributed like mandatory, like you need to bring Kleenex, you need to bring sanitizer. We never had that growing up until she started raising her kid down here, and then like, dang, guys, education's expensive. I can't even afford that.
I went to res schools all the way through high school graduation, so it was like, I don't even remember any of this stuff. And I was like, and being in the city, I'm like, well, they're cheap. Damn. Well, how come they can't pay for it? They pay for it out home, and it's just the difference, the culture shock, I guess.
The dynamic.
I felt like the schools weren't being as supportive to the community, when in fact it's the city. It's the other way around, where the community is supposed to be supporting the school.
Yeah. So going back on that comment, where who's invested in the community as far as like, who's taking on responsibilities as a teacher. The other aspect too is how much of the community is actually, supporting them and making sure these new stipulations are being met under these new circumstances. Where I have seen in my position, I do know, and I hear, and I'm the one who's half the time emailing parents too. But like maybe 3 or 4 of those emails that we have listed in the portal under the student. When I send an email to what's listed for the parents, is not even rich. It always gets kicked back. This address can't be found. And it's like the frustrating part is, why would you submit an email? So why would you submit an email that isn't even registered anymore? Like,
that's so funny.
I think that would be an issue.
It's an issue.
Yeah.
It's so funny because
it's a big issue.
I know with my school district, if they're not virtually, we have to make contact by telephone. And some of us were calling every day, and it's really crazy. You get hung up on, you get sent to voicemail, number is no longer in service, you get blocked.
Every teacher out there, I guarantee you, has a story of a bad interaction with a parent. It's just what it is, you know?
Sometimes, and it's so funny because sometimes you have to almost think like, okay, don't take it personal.
Yes.
Don't take it personal. I'm like, but I just want to talk to you about, your child. That's
something
important.
nice. Yeah. And it might be something nice.
Yeah, something positive. But yeah, something so simple as having an updated phone number is so crucial. So, quick shout out to the parents. Make sure your number is up to date so we can call you. Don't hang up on us. We're trying to reach out for your child's sake,
Especially if we're coming from the Indigenous community and we're saying it's the community, it's the tribe, it's the village that raises a child.
What it is, though, when it comes to Indigenous communities, it's that historical trauma that affects generations that we tend to forget about. And that whole mindset of a school being in a assimilatory space, being two different entities of community and school. And it's, as an educator, that's one thing that I'm mindful of. It's how can you break that barrier and allow that reciprocity to happen between community and school and bring those two entities together.
Where it does then comes into play the importance of, it is true where they say if there's representation there, kids do look up to that. So if you're coming from a population that does have a high brown community within the student population.
Right.
How many of those teachers actually come from those brown communities? How many are Native? How many are Hispanic?
Yeah, or even like what's the different reactions and the behaviors? I guess the reception of authority figure for a teacher of color versus non.
But even extending that further too, and saying like the school that I work for. The people are awesome. The people are terrific. I've stayed there for the past, I'm going on my 5th school year now working at this location. And it's an amazing team, administrative team. But one thing that I do see, every person in the administrative wing, you're talking counselors, vice principal, they're all white people. And, when it comes to that chain of command, then it's how do you, not to say that it's a bad thing, but how do you push for like representation and setting the example basically for the kids? How do you fix that?
I think for me, it's just having those conversations. And luckily for me, I came from a teacher cohort that is focused around that Indigenous concepts and social justice oriented teaching.
Yeah.
And so I'm comfortable. I'm trained to have those conversations, to bring them to light. And even if I teach in a metropolitan area, I still design my classroom expectations as if I were at home. We talk about Samit-Nangwa, we talk about Gepsi, we talk about Namit-Nangwa, and I use those very words and break them down for my students. Yes, you hear respect thrown out there a lot, but what does it mean? How can we show it? And it's really building that strong foundation with your classroom community and the expectations. And one biggest expectation I have as an educator is always ask yourself, am I doing something that my ancestors would be proud of? And that gives them that concept of responsibility, being ready to learn, being respectful to yourself and others. And, all I have to say now, once I get them to that point is, are you acting in a way that your nana, your tata, your ancestors will be proud of you? So Hopi is a very intertwined, community-based group of people. We believe in the concepts of helping one another through reciprocity, doing things because it's for the benefit of the good without having to have recognition for it or be rewarded for it. Being told to do it. You're doing it because it's the right thing to do. And then having that concept of working together for the betterment of all, the betterment of everybody, not just us, but the people, our grandparents, our families, our ancestors, our animals, our plants, all of those concepts to bring good in people. And that's something that even being in a metropolitan area, I find ways of my values coming back and still being embedded within this classroom community.
The way we are taught in our culture is that everyone is dependent on one another. So if you are not contributing as best as you can to, learn how to do things that are going to benefit your family, that are going to benefit your community, your village, then you're not only letting yourself down, it has a domino effect because you no longer contribute something for everyone else to flourish, to benefit.
I hit the timer, but I didn't hit the record. That was my fault.
Do you want to go back? What did we say?
Do we want to go back?
There's no go backs.
There's no take backs.
Is it recording?
Yes.
Okay, start
Okay.
this one.
I'm sorry. I think that one and the one before it. I don't think.
Oh
they're good.
no!
See, now you guys feel our frustration.
Technology.
See, it's the parents and these are the expectations for the parents, your checklist. And
But that's how it goes. So, like
Yeah.
every day,
You just gotta
have
roll
this-
with it.
Yes, you have this wonderful lesson planned, and like our district is solely non-paper,
uh-huh.
so it's all technology based. And you like think you spend like all like half of your evening creating this awesome lesson. Something happens.
Yeah.
Technology
In
don't
a
work.
perfect world, but then reality hits
Yeah.
you, and it's like, oh, well,
Okay.
that's not how I planned it.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out.
Yes.
Sorry.
So explain to the listeners what we're talking about.
Technical difficulties. It was
It's
on
not
my
a
end.
difficulty. It was not doing my
It
job.
was a user error.
So basically, this whole time we recorded 2 sessions so far. I turned on our timer so we could stay on track, but I forgot to hit the actual record, the voice recorder for my brothers and I. Our mic.
She doesn't edit this, so she's laughing about it. She doesn't edit.
That's all
One is
right.
like, that's gonna be our voices are gonna sound like that.
It's all right though, because I think you and I are already loud enough anyway.
Yeah, I'm
so-
hoping our voice. Well, I know definitely my voice carried over to that mic. We'll see how this episode comes out in
Yeah.
editing, and I'll try to include as much of the conversation from previous recordings on what has been discussed in terms of frustrations from teachers, parent aspect, student aspect.
Equity of accessibilities, reservation schools versus urban
Mhm.
settings.
cultural differences.
Yeah, cultural differences, even the emotional learning curves that we've all had to experience going from, teachers or educators, staffing perspectives, parent perspectives, even the different age ranges that we've been discussing. So let's go ahead and jump on to the next topic that I wanted to discuss, which was schools reopening and the impacts it may have on our communities. And in my personal opinion, I think it's premature. The main reason why I bring this up is because my son, his school district has sent out a notification yesterday that they are rolling out the hybrid learning. Basically, I have no choice but to send my son onto campus. They're going to be in smaller classes for 2 days out of the week and then 3 days virtual learning. And myself, I'm not comfortable with that. I was about ready to go ahead and have my son unenroll from his school, from his high school. His school does offer a full-time online academy.
Mhm.
So,
which is a separate enrollment process, though. So if she
Right.
wanted to send him and say, no, I don't want my kid going to classes and stay virtual, then she would effectively unenroll him from where he's registered at and then enroll him in that online academy.
but the problem with that is he is enrolled in something that's called the Cambridge Academy. And
Basically Fast track, how can I complete my high school credits faster in order to help me get into college and start earning college credit
this is
courses.
his own academic goals that he set for himself when he was in middle school. He learned about the Cambridge program when he did, you know how they do the freshman tour and stuff like that. He found out about the Cambridge Academy, and basically for his freshman and sophomore year, he would be taking those fast track courses. Basically, by the time he's a sophomore, he would try these exams that he has to pass. And if he passes the exams, he could basically earn his high school diploma by the time he's done with his sophomore year. And what would be his junior and senior year, his school district can pay for him to go to a community college. So that was his personal goal in order to find his educational pathway, doing his community college years for his junior and senior year, and then transitioning over to university. But my predicament was, I don't want him to go on campus, first of all. But how is that going to impact his program goals, right? His educational goals. So I had to reach out to them, and they did tell me that there is an option for him to go through online, but they don't have the courses, the Cambridge courses, through the online academy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What they said was that he would have to enroll in completely different courses, and they could supplement the Cambridge learning, and he could still test, because it's not. The whole program isn't based on whether you complete those courses or not. It's if you're ready and you test out and you actually pass. But because he's already been on he's already completed the tier 1, he's already on tier 2, and we've already had to go through
schedule changes,
like right? That. And even the changes of the learning environment.
So you've already invested into all of this.
Yeah. So I asked him, and I asked him, because I believe he's mature enough to make these kinds of decisions, and I want him to internalize all of that for himself to, get that practice of choices, and like he said in our previous discussions, choices and your accountability. So I want him to start already getting a practice for that. So I take what his wants are into high consideration. Unfortunately, I'm just left with the decision to go ahead and send him back on campus, so that he can stay with the program.
I think that that's good, though, as a parent being an advocate for your child's learning, because sometimes as parents, you see things from a different perspective, and you ask the questions that may not have been asked.
Right.
So like that, in asking that question, that hybrid model, they might not have even thought about the process of how is this going to affect our Cambridge student. By you asking that question, you brought that discussion to the table. To where the decisions are being made. And I think that that's really important as parents, is to advocate for your students' learning, to ask questions.
Well, as far as, the schools reopening, right now it's just a really scary, thought, because, every day watching the news, watching social media, you see that these numbers are still going up. It's a great concern, for the students themselves, for the staff, that are going to be interacting with these students. And even though, they say that the protocols are going to be in place, things like that, there's still no guarantee.
Right.
And, the fact that the thing that scares me the most is when students go onto campus that their parents have to sign a form, an insurance form, basically, to protect the school district themselves, saying that, by signing this, you're agreeing to coming on campus, you're aware of, what could happen. And if you happen, to catch this, then we're not
liable for it?
Legally.
Oh my gosh.
It's just a scary thought, that it's come to that point to where on paper you have to, sign that, pretty much saying, okay, well, I'm coming to school, but if I catch it, then,
And that's specifically for your own school district?
I think it's school districts across the state, whoever
really? Have
has
you seen
open.
That? I have, because when I got the email, I didn't get any of that information.
It might be coming yet.
What happened with my district is that they basically kept sending out surveys to all the staff. It didn't matter if you're a teacher, custodian, administration. They kept us on our toes by asking a lot of questions. If in this situation, would you rather do this or rather do that? Like they presented us as like we had an option of kind of like a say in what would happen, but really they just wanted to get a feel of like who would be cool with it and who wouldn't.
What
be cool
the consensus
with it.
was.
And literally the questions then came down to the last questionnaire and the last survey that they forwarded all employees was, once we open campuses, because we are going to open campuses, how many of you guys are going to stay? How many of you guys are going to leave? So then it really becomes down into the decision of like, where does health overweigh education? And it's like, that's the battleground right now, and the argument of like, if I'm sick, I can't learn. But at the same time, going back to the socioeconomic standings where we do have a significant, and coming from majority brown population schools where the economic status is going to be lower than most other schools, it's those families who like, I need my kid to go to school because whatever situation where I'm having to like literally I cannot work from home, I have to go to work, and there's nobody at home to supervise my child. There's nobody at home to cook for my child.
That's true.
So it's like these kids need to come to school, which is why we opened up campuses early already. Kids have been coming onto our campus, not a lot, because fortunately our location is far enough from their homes that like they couldn't they would have to transport them to our campus and pick them up, which our parents cannot do.
And those students that are on campus, are they like considered a high risk?
It was a really strict guideline that was passed out. Like, if you need, and this is what the governor has sent out, like all campuses need to be open to allow students who need access to the learning environment to be able to have to come onto campus so that they can learn. And for our campus, it was really only like 3 or 4 kids a week. It was a weekly trial basis. You had to apply the week before in order to be accepted. And we were strict with, if you drop off your kid late, past a certain time, they're not going to be allowed in to school campus. If you pick up your kid at the end of the day, after this certain time, they're not going to be allowed to come back for the rest of that week. But one of our kids is in the group home environment, and a good number of our population is, in the system, the foster care system. It's like, what do you do in situations like that? So, again, it's a real eye opener in like, these are what these kids' life situations are.
Right. And they're not even taking all of that. Like we said, the cultural aspects, the lively, and it's, because I got a lot of the surveys too, that were being sent out to the parents. And what I didn't like about the surveys is that they were all multiple choice and there was only one free text at the end. And
for comments.
Right. And in the surveys that did have more comments, I would just state flat out, I am not for schools reopening. And I just told them we're not ready for it.
It's just a really hard decision. I mean, all households are different, all households are having different struggles. No household, is the same. So you really have to, be mindful of that also, when making these decisions. But then a lot of it too, just watching the news that, with the statement that our president made, if schools don't open, we're cutting funding.
Yeah.
And at that point, that's
the thing to do.
Yeah.
It becomes a political.
Yeah, it
Of
becomes
course, but
a
it's not
political.
surprising, but still, it's like,
Just with this whole pandemic in general, that I'm really hoping that this gives our overall society a really big eye opener of how important our schools are. Because I think at one point, we're considered babysitters. You hate to say it, but it's
we're
true.
free childcare.
Right.
Even for after school activities, I also coach athletics, and I was talking with our computer tech guy on campus. He's also a coach. He also stays after school. And we were talking with one another, and one comment that he made to me was like, man, what I really miss is coaching. And that's what I said, yeah, I do too, because as much as these kids miss playing, it's like we miss having those interactions because of my position at the school. It's the one interaction where I get to know like the more better behaved kids, and it's just a different learning environment. It's another learning opportunity that you get to engage with these kids. And it's not happening right now.
And I think a lot of it too is a lot of these children see the school as being their normal routine. That's their safe place, to go. I mean, one of the things I remember when I first graduated from school, one of my souls wrote in my card, be nice to your kids. You don't know what they go home to.
Right.
So it's something that I definitely carry with me every day, when they tell you stories, just overall, what their lifestyle is and how can we be there to support them.
Right.
And then, I just remember one of my way back to my first year of teaching, I remember I was absent from work one day and, the kids, I came back and they're like, where were you? I'm like, I was only gone for one day. But, they really just attached to, and you're that consistent person in their life other than their parents,
Right.
and it is true. We do spend more time with, their children, before they do, of course they have them on the weekends, but we're constantly with them.
If you count up the hours that they're awake, if they're supposed to be, they're supposed to be in school, they spend more time with us
if they make
than
it
they
to
do
school.
in the families,
I learned from the very beginning that they're not my students. I call them my kids. Every single year, they're my kids because, they're with us, for that amount of time. But you don't realize the impact that you make on them and the impact that they make on you as a person. You don't realize how much the little things, mean to them and how much of those little things really mean to you too.
Yeah.
And I think it's, different now as a virtual teacher. It's how can you consistently keep up those socio-emotional check-ins with your students physically, you see them come into the class. You can physically see their shoulders slouch. They're having a bad day coming in. You can see it on their face. And virtually, it's to be mindful of that virtually and having those constant, emotional check-ins. How are you feeling today?
Mhm.
And it's how can you do that virtually?
Yeah.
And so that's, something that I've been mindful of, is that we're all dealing with frustrations as an adult. I learning how to navigate those emotions, but teaching these kids the tools and stuff that they need to deal and navigate those emotions as well.
So one thing that I received in an email from a colleague who teaches 7th grade math, and she said, this is just an email she's shared with all of the staff, like these are some of the benefits that I see in teaching virtually, is that she's able to give the attention needed to who she feels needs it in that moment. And that was one upside that she saw of having them, like, I can put you in this virtual room by yourself and you and I can interact on a one-on-one basis and I can help you work this out. Or, if you have any questions, I can speak with you directly. But something that also just popped into my mind is how many of these kids who participate in virtual classes, how many of them are more vocal now because of that setting versus standing up in front of like a room full of 30 people,
And you think about students who are in an ex-ed environment, an ex-ed education,
Yes.
They're currently in their home space where they feel comfortable. And
Yeah.
with one of my students, I really did see that last quarter, is that there was more accountability from him being in his own learning environment, being in his space, and when he would come to school.
And you think it's just because it's a space that they actually have
It's their
control
own
over?
they're
Yes.
comfortable
Versus
in.
when you go to the classroom, I'm sorry to say it, but you do have some students, some kids, and it just grasping from my own experiences in school where you have mean kids, and there's that pressure when you're called upon from the teacher, if you answer the question right, you're ridiculed as being a show off. Or
Teacher's pet.
Yeah, or if you answer it wrong, you're ridiculed for being stupid.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no winning in those social situations as far as, the student's perspective goes.
But then also you have to consider the flip side of that also, that, you have those students who don't have the virtual aspect of it.
Right.
Like for myself, I have to call and make those phone calls,
Right.
So I can't see them. I can't read their expressions, when you're trying to teach them a lesson, they're like, do you understand? Do you get it? And I'm like, yeah, okay. And, and then myself in my back of my mind, I'm kind of like, okay, well, did I really make an impact? Do they really understand it? Am I doing what I'm supposed to?
In a normal setting, you could hear them say, yeah, but you could still see that puzzled look on their face.
Mhm.
Like,
And
it
then
doesn't
you know
look like
what
you
you
get
need
it,
to do.
So the
Yeah.
facial cues
Mhm.
aren't there, so it's harder for you to read.
And then it's just, for me, being new in the area that I'm in, I don't know majority of the students. So it's funny, I call them, I'm like, oh, good morning, this is Missy Kakaku. They're like, oh, hi, how are you? But we don't know what each other, looks like, because we haven't had that chance to interact with each other. So it's kind of almost like we're talking to a stranger, but yet we still know each other.
So going into, checking into with our students, are they okay? What about those who come from the single parent households and then carry on, they feel that they are obligated to take on the responsibility of making sure, are the younger siblings okay? Moms, having to go to work, otherwise we're going to not be able to afford rent this month. So where am I going to have to step up my responsibilities in domestic care, but also schoolwork? What are some thoughts you guys have toward that?
I think as a parent, that self-care at this time is really crucial. I think as a person individually, that this experience has really allotted me to evaluate myself, be able to psychologically evaluate my emotions, understand my trigger points, be mindful when I'm getting there, and to find something, whether it be having my headphones in when I'm cooking supper, still getting that domestic part finished, but having that reserve for myself with something that can help keep me stable. You do get cabin fever. You do get frustrated easily, even with, your partner sometimes. Even if you do have a partner, you're with them all day. All day. The moment you wake up, the moment you go to sleep, you're with them all day. And, so it's being mindful of that self-care and finding ways that you can do that for yourself.
And that's funny that the concept of self-care wasn't even thought of in generations previous to us, because, you know, our souls, our moms, they had no idea
because
of what
the philosophy
was
always like,
the
there's
family
what
comes
needs to
first.
be done.
Yeah.
This is what
Think
needs to be
about
done.
it and you analyze it and you take that word of self-care, the Bahana word, that's what you see.
Right.
But if you culturally analyze self-care for Gua could have been going to the field by
Right.
himself.
Right.
That whole morning, that early morning, being there all day, that could have been his self-care. Self-care could have been for So'o picking her moho by herself.
Right.
You know, so we have to take into consideration, how can I create this Bahana definition of self-care to fit me as an individual based on my values and beliefs.
Our campus opened up again for this school year, the 2020-21 school year. I leaped at the opportunity to go ahead and just go back into my office on campus. I've been out for 4 months. Like, I haven't been doing anything. I kept myself busy while I was not on campus, but like I'm able to go back onto campus now. I'm going to take it. Like, I'm going to go just because it's that environment. It's a break from being stuck at home. The environment, you know, wouldn't you say that teaching from home has affected your style and method of teaching? Like, just because of the environment that you're in? Like, we're talking about kids being affected learning-wise being at home. How has it affected, you know, your end?
I think for me, the most important thing first is being able to find that space at home in order to do that. So currently I'm teaching in my spare bedroom. You know, first when we knew what we had to do, that we were going to be teaching from home, you know, and automatically that comes out of our pocket. You know, no one's going to buy those things for us.
Right.
So right away, you know, I tried to bring as much stuff from my classroom home to make it feel like home, you know, because as you know, as educators, we're there 5 days out of the week, easy 8-10 hours a day. So that's our home. So I brought things from my classroom to make me feel more at home. And it was just, okay, well, I'm going to get on Amazon. So I ordered myself a big little whiteboard for that's on my closet.
Right.
You know, I put borders up on my closet to make it look like, you know, a bulletin board. I have my 100 chart. I have my ABC chart. I'm like, okay, I can do this.
To make it feel more productive for yourself.
Speaking of memes, have you seen the one where it says government-funded classroom? It's just bare classroom and then teacher-funded classroom, and all the bulletin boards are decked out.
True, because all of our lives, you know, growing up, we've always seen our mother do her purchases, personal purchases, and our dad would kind of get after her, like, why aren't you having the school pay for that and all that stuff?
Because they don't.
Shut up.
Because you know what you want versus what you're provided with. You don't get a say in that. So if you shop for your own supplies, you know what you're purchasing. You have a say in that.
And most of the time, it's her purchases weren't for herself. It was for to give out to the kids, because hers was always pencils, paper.
The further that I get along in my career, it's just part of it. It just comes with the package, you know. And at this point, you know, I told my other half, I said, you know, when school starts, my kids are my priority. If I'm going to stay late, it's for my kids. If I'm going to buy something, it's going to be for my kids. And you know, I just need you to understand that and to support that.
Now, you two are both in the younger generation of the educators. How is it with you guys interacting with the previous generations?
A lot of tech support.
Yep. Yes.
What about, like, as far as innovative thinking and, like you said, creative thinking?
I think that for me, coming from a social justice oriented mind frame and teaching style, that it's how can you have those respectful conversations to where they're open and comfortable to doing that, you know. So it's making them comfortable in showing them, also teaching them, but also making sure that they're comfortable too in asking the questions with you as a younger educator.
Thinking about it, you know, over the years, all of my experiences working with different teachers, working with different mind frames, I think the most important thing is just to be open, you know, just to be open to new concepts, not only you opening up and teaching new concepts, but also you being open to their older concepts, I guess you could say, you know, just finding that balance and being respectful of one another. And then most importantly, supporting one another, because, you know, the main thing that I think of the old golden saying is treat somebody, how you would want to be treated,
Right.
because there might be a day I don't know how to do something. So I'm going to go ask them. So I want to make sure that I have that connection with them to where I can also go to them, for help.
Right.
So it works both ways.
And I think in education, it's just constantly having that open mindset and that growth mindset that nothing is ever going to stay the same. Things
Right.
are always constantly going to change.
Day by day,
Yes.
hour by hour, minute by minute in this case.
So what are some of the tips that you guys can give for
Parents.
teachers? Yeah.
Well, we cover teachers. I think, in sharing your perspectives and how to approach, these times
the
as
parents
educators.
and or guardians, community members, on how they can provide support to you guys and not necessarily be your opponent with trying to be creative with the virtual learning.
What is one thing that you guys would wish parents would know? Like from your end, like what is something,
Go ahead.
without any negative emotion behind it, what is something that you just wish to communicate to parents?
Anything that is said here, it's not with any ill intent. There's no placing blame. It's just an offering of a different perspective that you might not be aware of.
I think the biggest thing is communication. We want to hear from you. We want you to call us. We want you to send us a text. We want you to
list the right email.
Update your phone number.
We had virtual parent teacher conferences just this past week. And what I ended each conference with was just solely thanking the parents for being there, making sure their kiddo, is there every day, and just saying, I couldn't have done this without you. Mm-hmm. And just that mere acknowledgement of, I'm not doing this by myself. You are a big part of this as well. It changed the dynamics of the communication barrier now. So they feel appreciated, they feel valued, they feel that their effort is seen and appreciated. So now, like this week was different in terms of communication, letting them know that you're open to communicating. Your kid's playing a new sport, I want to know.
Just a quick question too, how have your attendances been since you've been virtually teaching?
It's been rough, to be honest. At my school that I currently work at, I have the option of being virtual and paper packets. So, virtual, we're required to have them log in, sign in with us. For the most part, majority of my students, after the first 2 weeks of technical difficulties and, learning how to log in, I would say the attendance has gotten, a lot better. They're focused, they're ready to learn. They know what time to log in. They're starting to understand their schedule. With the paper packet, it's a little bit different, only because we have to call and we have to make that contact with them. And then that's where the issues come up, where the parents aren't answering, voicemails are coming on. So for me, that's a little bit harder, just making sure that we're understanding, that communication. And like how Christy was saying, that communication is key. It's vital.
The engagement.
Yeah.
And also for the parents' sake too, I just wanted to let it be known that we know you guys do have jobs, and if you're that single parent and you're at work, I ran into a couple, I don't like to call them issues, but just situations where my boss is trying to handle a disciplinary action, and it's like the parent picks up the phone and it's like, I can't talk, I'm in work right now. And so we're more than happy to call back and leave a detailed message. We're more than happy to send an email, as long as it's to the right email. We aren't just here to judge you and your parenting. Just let us know what your situations are, and we'll be happy to work with you and how to communicate more effectively.
It's just part of that help us help you, mindset.
And I would like to comment that, as someone who works closely with administration, there have been a lot of stuff that have come up, and it's like we just don't have answers sometimes, for some sticky situations and
it's
the real
being
detailed
honest
stuff
with them when you don't have those answers. Just, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I will get back to you.
Instead of redirecting me to this other person.
Right. And the thing is that I want to keep parents in mind, as a parent, when we're in the middle of getting those unfavorable answers and barriers that we have to overcome as a household, in the moment before you send anything out or call anybody, is go ahead and have your feelings offline or off the air
before you post
and go ahead
media.
And work through those emotions as you're going through it. Allow it some time to settle, and that way when you're reaching out to whoever that you're reaching out to, it's more constructive, and your information, your feedback is listed in facts, and maybe you want to go ahead and leave tangible information of what's happening in the household, what your capabilities are, what the limitations are, and just be really frank and honest. And if they don't have a pathway for you, asking them, okay, if you can't solve this for me, where do I go to next?
And this is just going back to, education isn't a one size fits all. And that's really just the root, I think, of every single issue that we are facing as teachers, as administrators, as support staff.
And I think as a metropolitan area and a reservational area, just to keep in mind, parents, to be patient. This is something that we've never experienced before. You're not going to get it the first week. You're not going to get it the first month. Even working in a metropolitan area where we have hotspots available for our students, we have devices for our students, we still run into the issues of internet logons, tech issues, things not working. This frame of teaching is going to be at a slower pace. Your student is still learning. I can't stress patience enough.
One thing I'd like to, thank the students for, at least from my experiences in, being that I had to administer so many tests within the past week, and I'm still going up until next Wednesday, is the patience from the kids themselves, where they are virtually logging into this system where they have to go to the specific website, and then they have to wait for me to approve them. Then they have to get the password and the code and the IDs, all of that stuff, all that technical stuff. Even though it takes them literally like anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes to actually sign in and begin taking this test, they have been patient for the most part on their end, because they do know it's a process, and it's like a 3-way channel where they're talking to their teacher on Zoom. The teacher on Zoom is giving me a call. I'm setting it on the computer, and I let the teacher know. Then the teacher lets the kid. It's this whole system that we've had to improvise ourselves.
And the kids, for the most part, they want to learn.
Right.
They miss it.
In that.
They
They
miss
miss
it.
that.
So I want to know what keeps you going and what keeps you from giving up.
Are you crazy?
On the
So many different levels.
on this particular career path, because it's an investment into the community.
I think it's never forgetting your intentions of why you wanted to sign up for this job, and always carrying that with you. One thing for me is I always look back at my university work, my essays, my teaching philosophy, am I fulfilling that philosophy? Because those are my words. That's my philosophy. Do I still believe in that? And I think that just the kids, right? The kids have ways of just reminding you of why you chose this job, why everything is worth it.
So one thing that I really enjoyed during these testing sessions is, first and last name, this student needs to take this test. Oh, I remember that kid. Or I'd let the teacher know. Let them know their coach says hi.
I've had the opportunity, to teach for about 10 years now. And it's just a really fulfilling job. It's just kind of one of those jobs that you don't forget why you're doing this. You go in, day out. And with all these changes happening, at the end of the day, we're still there. We're still there helping, no matter how upset people are with us, the things people say about us, we're still there for your kids, at the end of the day. And for me, it's just seeing your former students down the road. And, for myself, my first group of kids are going to be seniors next year. Just for me, it's just really fulfilling and really amazing watching your kids grow up.
That's a special milestone for you.
You grow up with them, you raise, you help, I feel that since I don't have children of my own, that, I feel that bond with them, that I helped somewhat, big or small, develop the person that they are. Seeing them go through elementary, promote from junior high, you're still getting those invitations. You see their parents, they're still letting you know how they're doing. You see them participate in sports, and, it's just really amazing to watch them grow. That's all that it is you just watch them grow into this person. I remember one year I finally got my first letter. My favorite teacher was, and for me, and I actually still have that. I still have the writing that student made for me. If I'm thinking like, God, this is so hard. Am I really making an impact? Am I doing what I'm supposed to? I think about that student, and it makes me realize you're okay.
More so than ever, times like this, it's like we need to make sure that we are there to aid in their development, to help them grow in this time.
Mhm.
And I think understanding that impact, it helps you be intentional in what you compose.
Mhm. Everything has more meaning than what it did before. Not saying that it didn't before, but now,
You realize it more.
yes, and you appreciate the fact that you could give those kids hugs when they needed it, when they wanted to come to you, when you say bye to them, when you wave to them on the last day of school, just those small things that you really do miss. There's been a couple times where I've had the opportunity to go into my classroom, and the first time I did, I just stood there and cried because knowing that my kids are never going to come and sit in these chairs. My kids are never going to get to see my silliness. My kids are never, going to get to hold this book. Just those little things you really do miss, that you didn't think was a big impact. But now seeing empty hallways, I can't make my bulletin boards, things like that you miss.
Well, I just really want to thank the two of you guys for willing to sit down and actually have this
Conversation with us.
like this actual discussion, which is something that I know that we're all hoping our listeners would also be engaged in. So just a reminder that if you are watching this on YouTube, you can, you're more than welcome to comment your own stories, your own 2 cents within the comments section. Or if you're listening on the Anchor platform, you can go ahead and send in your recording, which could be featured in a future podcast episode.
You can also reach us on all of our social media platforms, which is Facebook and Instagram. Go ahead and leave your likes, your followings, your comments. Engage with us. We look forward in hearing from you.
So just look for the star logo, Indigenous21. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you guys for being a part of this podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Bye.
Bye.